Hello and welcome back to Hillside Power Sport Repair. We bring you part one of this 96 F350's other issue, which is the front fuel pump pretty much doesn't work and the rear fuel pump is weak. It has trouble starting because of this. It's low on power. It just doesn't run good. So we picked up some fuel pumps and we're going to pull the bed, pull the cinders out, and then put aftermarket fuel pumps in it so it'll always have enough fuel. It's going to require a little bit of modification. The big deal is that I don't have any sort of hoist or anything. I got an engine hoist. I don't know if that's going to be big enough for this long bed. If it was a short bed, I know I could pull it off, but as it is, so got a couple ideas and we're going to go through pulling this bed. So let's see what happens. The first thing to do is go through and start checking. All right, there's bolt over there. There's two. Okay, none here, none here, none here. 3, 4, 5 over there, and 6 here. So we know we've got 6 bolts in this truck bed. I already pulled every little bit of scrap and stuff that was in there out and brought it in here so it could dry, which is always a plus if you have the luxury of doing that. And then we're going to pull the tail lights out and disconnect the wiring to them. And then you usually have to pull the bumper for this kind of thing. So there is an electrical plug here. So we'll pull these 2 Allens out, pull any wiring that's on it off, and then we'll look at pulling what I assume are the only 4 bolts holding this bumper on. Get out here so I got a better angle. Once that's there, we need to address what we've got going on here. So you can see the old truck hasn't been driven a terribly large amount. There's usually a vent tube and a filler neck going up to these. So we're going to look at doing both of them. And then we're going to push the truck out of the shop just a little bit because we're right at the end there. We're going to set the big workbench behind the truck, lift the back of the bed a little bit, and then scoot it onto the workbench using ratchet straps. Remember the D-rings and stuff I put on? That's why. We're going to scoot it to the back and then just shove it out of the way. And then I'll use one of my other benches or something to work on the fuel pumps with. That's the current idea. The other idea is maybe we have a really big tree branch, which I was unable to find one that I really liked. Or the other thought being pull it up somewhere, maybe even back a little bit, and go off the rafters with some ratchet straps. But that's not really how rafters are meant to carry weight. If you could plate the rafters in the very middle, pushing down, they're very strong. Because at that point you're trying to force them apart. But the other way it goes, they're not very good at holding weight from the bottom out, because that bottom bar, that beam, is meant to combat against stretch side to side. It's not meant to have you pull straight against it. So that's a little bit of that. 4 bolts on the bumper, 6 bolts on the bed. Looks like there's 4 bolts on each tail light, 4 screws, excuse me, and 2 Allens right there. So we will get on it. Always try and make sure you get all your electrical connectors before you start lifting stuff. I can't play that enough. Try and get everything loose before you start pulling other stuff physically off. So now I know I'm going to get some crap for taking the taillights out, because there is a sub harness that I'm not talking about, that I hadn't mentioned, that's underneath the truck. Sub harness, you can pull a connector and your taillights are wire free. Fantastical. I'll tell you why I go ahead and take them off anyways. I do leave the bulbs dangling. You know, bulbs are cheap, whatever. You know what isn't cheap? Factory tail light housings. And, we're 20, 35 bucks a piece, you break one up. Look, as much work as I do, if I break $20 or $30 worth of stuff on every vehicle, every machine, every whatever I touch, that really affects me a lot. So what I'm going to do, because this is a family member's vehicle, is I'm going to clean them up a little bit. I'm going to spray some stuff on them, clean them up real good, and stick them back on. This whole truck will look a lot better just doing that. Factory units always clean up good. You can always take a little bit of wet dry sandpaper and some spray bottle of soap and get that out earlier, gunk off there, and then just hit them with a buff wheel real quick, and they look fantastic. They're just thicker, better plastic. They've lasted, 96, 2022, it's what, 26 years? Doesn't feel like a truck should be that old. I think a 20-year-old truck's, I think, back in the 80s, 70s. But anyways, we're going to cover that gem right there. Now, there's a bolt right up there. There's another one over there, the nut for the bolts. I imagine there'll be a couple more just in front of this fuel tank. Yep, one up in there. And there's two at the very front. So we're just going through. I always do this. I go through, I make sure that I know where the bolt locations are before I get started. And I have a better look at everything. Like this here bumper has 1, 2, 3, 4. Four extra bolts that you couldn't see from the outside. And that's important stuff to know, guys. You go to do this. And I may end up loosening these as well, just to kind of finagle everything out. So that's the kind of stuff you need to know before you get started. It's important to take a minute, and all we're doing today is just prep. So don't get too excited. But we're just going to go through and prep. There's the sub-harness connectors we talked about. Piece of angle iron that was added. Anything you see that, it doesn't look like it's got a vent anymore on the rear differentials, that needs to be addressed. Just piddly stuff that we know what we're dealing with before we get started. It's always best to know what you're dealing with before you get started. And there's, the old truck's pretty clean for its age, but if you look up there, you can see transfer case has just a real mild weep, leak, something. It's just old. We call it a farm truck, but it's been a good old truck. Anyways, that's where we're at, folks. We're going to get started on that and figure out some sizes. And now, I know I didn't really go through the diagnosis on these things. The front pump, I can hear it run, but the truck won't start with it. The rear pump, I can hear it run, but the truck is just down on power from where it was. The front tank, as the rear tank runs, the front tank gains fuel. That tells me that the rear pump is, even if it is trying to make pressure, that the drain back valve, which is a one-way valve, and the fuel line on the front pump is bad. So that pump is burning itself up, just flat up. Now, you can be going down the road and you can hit that front pump and it'll sort of run. It's got volume, it doesn't have any pressure. That kind of thing. Maybe it's got pressure and no volume. It just won't hardly run at all. And it will not start on it. Will not. And that kind of defeats the purpose of having two tanks. So we've got over here, before we get too awful into this, like I said, it's just introduction. We're not going to get too far into anything today. We have some goodies. And we are going to have to do some modification because there isn't a kit to just do this. This is your Walbro 255 pump. Genuine. I'm sorry. I apologize. This is the Walbro GSS 340, which is a 255, but that's the model, the GSS 340. And then we got the install kits, which are the Walbro 400-812. They've got some interesting little gaskets and the socks and stuff that go on. They got some plugs. Got 2 of them, got 2 pumps. So this should be a running machine. I know these things run out of fuel on the top end. The 460s do. 351s really don't. Maybe they do as they're getting older, but there's a spider over there. Anyways, what we're going to do here is pull the bed, pull the cinders out, modify the cinders to hold the new fuel pumps at approximately the same angle, distance, etc., while still keeping the fuel sending units, which tell us how much gas is in it, intact. Reinstall everything, maybe go do some sort of stupid burnout, and then put the bed back on and call it good for a while. It's been a good old truck. The only other thing it's got is a parasitic draw. If you let it sit like 2-3 weeks, batteries too run down to start without help, as you saw with the Milwaukee battery jump thing. And that's it. That's our prep video. We got 6 bolts in the bottom of the bed, 8 bolts, not 4, in the rear bumper, 2 bolts holding that electrical plug for the trailer plug on, and that's pretty much it. This thing's going to come off relatively quick. The old trucks are just like that. We're going to see what we can do with maybe some pieces of wood and the engine hoist, and if that doesn't work, we're going to shove it back onto the workbench over here, and we'll go from there. Even if we do use the engine hoist, we're still going to have to get the truck out from underneath it, which is going to be interesting because it's supposed to rain and snow and tidal wave and whatever later this week. So even when the truck's outside, the top's going to be off the fuel tank. Excuse me, fuel pump's going to be out of it. So we're going to have to tarp that, keep it all balled up, and it's just going to be a fun time. But it's been a good old truck, and we're going to get her fixed up. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe. That way you don't miss the next installation, which is where we actually pull the bumper off, pull the bolts out of the bed, and attempt to finagle. I will probably have my buddy Tony here with me for that, for getting the bed off. So, thanks guys, and have a good night.